Hello everyone and welcome. Make a cup of your favorite drink and get comfortable because this is a wonderful time for new stories from Yellowcat. Send your own stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. Lawyers of Reddit, what's the dumbest thing you've had to explain to a client? In my state, we have this thing called victims' compensation. An oversimplification of how it works goes as follows. If you are the victim of a crime and suffer some form of injury, e.g. psychological, physical, etc., you can apply for a payment from state funds. If you are the perpetrator of one of those crimes, e.g. an assault, robbery, etc., an order can be made for you to pay the state back an amount relating to that victim's compensation. I had a client who felt the process of being convicted for assaulting his relatives and having to pay victims' compensation back to the state was arduous, and in return, he should be receiving victims' compensation from the state. So that was fun to explain. Explanation was, you are not the victim in that. I once had to explain what a maiden name was. They had no idea. Similarly, with a different client, I tried to explain why they needed to fill out the intake questionnaire. I was explaining that I need information such as their name, address, and date of birth in order to draft paperwork. Their response? Why do I have to do this? What did I even hire you for? You're useless. If I have to do all this work, I might as well represent myself. They were super peed and stomped out the front door. Sorry, I don't magically know your date of birth. As for the maiden name, it was a very small country town. This person was most definitely a native English speaker. As for the questionnaire, someone asked why we don't just ask for a driver's license. The questionnaire was about 2 or 3 pages long and also needed other information such as any previous name, social security number, children's names, etc. Bankruptcy attorney here. If you know you're coming to my office to file bankruptcy, do not make major financial decisions before you talk to me. E.g., cashing out your 401k, paying your family members the money you owe them, buying a car with no intention of paying off the loan, etc. The court allows you to discharge your debt, and the only thing they ask is for you to be honest and not sneaky about it. You gotta respect the process. Represented a client charged with statutory R who had a large number of explanations for the various evidence in his case that I had to explain would not be a good idea to testify or argue to the jury. The KY jelly you purchased with the kid at Walmart was not for applying to an undiagnosed skin condition on your chest. The hundreds of pages of intent chat logs prior to traveling hundreds of miles to meet the kid, consisting of repeated explicit S overtures, emotional manipulation, lies about your age and wealth, and specific plans for how you would remove him from his parents' home, were not meaningless banter. The fact that you had an active prescription for Viagra does not mean you are asexual. The S matching your DNA did not find its way into the rectum of a 13-year-old boy because of your medical condition that results in leakage, and the fact that when you are staying in a hotel room, you do not lift the toilet seat when you urinate, which must have resulted in the material being deposited on the seat and transferred to the boy when he sat on the seat. You were not the victim taken advantage of by the hyper-S teenager for whom you were merely trying to provide innocent emotional support. I had to explain all of these things and others many times. I'm not sure he ever actually believed any of them. That he hadn't really won a 20 million euro European super lottery from Australia that he'd never entered, and that it was a good thing that his family, bank, and church wouldn't lend him the $2,000 they said they needed to verify his identity, on top of the several hundred he'd already sent them, and that yes, his priest was right, it was a scam. This was during a clinic at a free community legal center. The poor guy had limited English and only $20 left in his bank account, and he really did not want to let go of the 20 million euro dream. His priest had sent him to us for advice because he wasn't having any luck talking sense into the old guy himself and thought lawyers might help. That they had to pay me. This is more common than you'd think. For some reason, some people think lawyers are like their personal spiritual guides or fairy godmother. When I was a legal intern at a criminal defender's law office, we had a client who was charged with murder. We explained to the client not to make any phone calls saying anything incriminating because it will be recorded. When prisoners can use the phone, there is a giant sign that says, "Phone calls will be recorded." On top of that, before you are able to call out, there is an automated recording that tells you that all calls are being recorded and monitored, unless it is to your attorney, which are covered by privilege. Client made a call to his girlfriend that evening, asking her to hide the gun. I like to think that he was trying to speak in code. "I need you to hide my sandwich to make sure no one can find it." "Huh? Your sandwich?" "Yes, my sandwich. The hot one? People will be looking for it." "But we had pizza for dinner." "No, my sandwich. Go hide my hot sandwich, the one with smoked meat." The cops show up, find the gun on the table, and see the end of a smoked turkey sub sticking out from under the couch. I recently had a call from a guy who found out that Long John Silver's was microwaving his baked shrimp combo. He wanted to eat there for every meal for a year and then sue them for false advertising. He changed his mind when I suggested that he would probably die of a heart attack before reaching his 1-year goal. That young boss sending you a drug test after he walked in on you snorting cocaine off your desk does not qualify as entrapment. You cannot sue him. Don't signal to the judge you need to use the restroom during your trial by making eye contact and vigorously nodding while urgently pointing at your crotch. When a client called me this past Memorial Day and I asked why she was calling me on a holiday, she replied that she didn't think Jews celebrated Memorial Day. Never thought I would have to explain that to anyone. To answer some of the questions, yes, I am Jewish. No, I never told her I was Jewish. I have an answering service which took her call and emailed me the message, which was that it was very urgent that she speak with me that day. Given the courts were closed and her case was a paternity and child support matter, I thought it had to be quite the emergency. It was not. She just wanted to ask whether the suspected father was required to take the DNA test ordered by the court. I then had to explain what paternity meant. That the presence of yellow fringe on the flags in the courtroom do not mean that the court is an admiralty court without jurisdiction to hear the client's criminal case. Sovereign citizens are something else. I was clerking in a bankruptcy court, and we had a case where the petitioners were a group of men that had a mix of ideologies between sovereign citizenship, the redemption movement, and strawman theory. They believed that an individual had two personas. One, the real flesh and blood human being, and the other, a separate legal personality or person, usually written in capitals, who is the straw man. And that the straw man is responsible for all their debts, liabilities, taxes, and legal responsibilities belong to the straw man rather than the physical individual themselves. Also that when you're born, the government puts $630,000 in an account for the straw man, and somehow you can write checks off that account using the UCC. Basically, the petitioners went into a Cadillac dealership and presented these straw man checks and demanded cars. The dealership calls the police and they are arrested for fraud. Then the petitioners attempt to force the dealership into involuntary bankruptcy so they could get the cars. There were 3 petitioners, and they were all pro se, so needless to say, the motions were ridiculous and unintelligible. And this was on my second day as a clerk. I once had to explain to opposing counsel that his entire argument was wrong because he had cited a statute for chattels, not real property. It was a case involving a land contract. I used to be a legal aid lawyer, so sometimes I had sovereign citizens come in for help. I'd have to explain that their magic words wouldn't solve anything and they were going to get evicted. If they wouldn't agree to negotiate for settlement, I wouldn't represent them because they never had any real defenses and we didn't have the resources to litigate impossible cases. I had to argue against someone who claimed to have copyright law on their side for the opening of Bash's Cantano number 140, Wash It Off. A pop instrumentalist arranged Bash's masterpiece, then claimed it as his own. After I played the original, there was zero doubt in the courtroom regarding who was the master and who was the imposter. I was contacted by a couple who had paid for a trip to see the midnight sun in northern Norway. They wanted to sue the travel agency when they found out it was the same sun as always. I had to explain that there's only a single sun and that they can't sue a travel agency for selling a midnight sun trip. Not the lawyer. I'm the other side of the lawsuit for this piece of work. Obviously, I'm not trying to reveal details, sorry, but it's still going on. So far, we, the judges, his lawyer, I want to say it's been 9 different lawyers now, etc., have had to explain to him statute of limitations. Lawyers quit if you don't pay them. My lawyer cannot advise him. He has to pay the court fees. Lawyers quit if you don't pay them. If you fire your lawyer when suing a corporation, you will be kicked out. Lawyers quit if you don't pay them. Statute of limitations. My lawyer cannot advise him that during discovery, he handed over emails that had the actual date of a meeting instead of the month earlier he was claiming. Lawyers quit if you don't pay them. Statute of limitations. Yes, the judge can go off the record and berate you for 15 minutes if she thinks it helps the case. My lawyer will laugh in his face for asking for advice about the judge. His lawyer needs actual address, not just a FedEx store where he picks up his mail periodically. The court isn't going to bother calling each of 8 different cell numbers that just might be the one you currently have active. Lawyers quit if you don't pay them. My lawyer cannot advise him. The reading of the settlement and agreeing to it on record in court is binding. Simply saying that a person is the attorney doesn't actually make them the attorney. There's actual paperwork. My lawyer cannot advise him. Lawyers quit if you don't pay them. The ruling was against him and he can't sell what was never his. He needs to actually pay the court fees for his appeal. He needs an attorney for the appeal because corporations must be represented by an attorney in court. He needs to file the paperwork required for an appeal. He still needs an attorney for the appeal because corporations still have to be represented by an attorney in court. My lawyer cannot advise him. Yes, Rule 8.140A1 really does mean you're about to be kicked out permanently. By October 28, he needs to have an attorney and pay the court fees and file his paperwork or his appeal goes away. And lastly, just because I feel like it needs another one, lawyers quit if you don't pay them, simply because that's how he went through so many of them. Almost forgot. My lawyer cannot give him any advice. I had a client once who was in trouble for stealing sample medications from a hospital. We got security footage from the DA as part of the evidence, and when it came down, we watched it together. The camera was literally 10 feet away in a well-lit room, and we watched her shovel prescription samples into a garbage bag and walk off. After it was done, she turned to me and asked if I thought she was going to be able to get off. I said no. Thank you for watching. Guys, thank you for all the support in their lives. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. See you next time.